Well, good afternoon, everyone. We've just been waiting for a few more people to attend, but we have some great numbers. A very warm welcome to the launch of the new revised strategy for Scotland's dairy sector, Rising to the Top 2030. My name is Alan Stevenson from SUS, and I'm also a member of the Scottish Dairy Growth Board. I'm ably assisted today by my colleagues, Amanda Brown and Alison Watson, who are working the technology behind the event, and Amanda has also been deeply involved in the development of the strategy. So a little bit of housekeeping before the event starts. The format for the next hour will be an introduction from Paul Grant, Chairman of Scottish Dairy Growth Board, who will be hosting the event today. And I'm very pleased to say, followed by Ben Macpherson, the Minister for Rural Affairs and the Natural Environment. Then we'll have an overview presentation from Paul to give you more detail on the new strategy. We'll also be emailing you an e-brochure of the document after the launch, so you don't need to take any notes. And finally, I will host a question and answer session with a panel of fellow members from the Scottish Dairy Growth Board. These are all experts in their own particular field. Because of the large numbers joining today, all questions will have to be submitted through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please don't wait until the end of the presentation to submit your questions. It's probably best done as they come to mind. We'll collate these and put them to the panel for you. And if we don't get through all the questions, we'll respond directly by email to the individuals concerned. So that's all the detail for now, and the countdown finished. I'll hand you over to Paul to commence the launch. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you all for joining us today. We're absolutely delighted with the attendance, and we're delighted also that there are people attending from around the world. So we have people from the SDI people in market specialists. We have Deirdre from Holland. And we also have Forrest, who's with us representing China. So very, very special, and thank you to all of you. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to Ben Macpherson, MSP, Minister for Rural Affairs and the Natural Environment, who is going to make some opening remarks. So over to you, Ben.
So yes, thank you, Paul, for that kind introduction, and I'm really delighted to be with you all today to help with the launch of the dairy strategy and this really exciting new chapter of Scotland's food and drink success story. Collectively, we should be rightly proud of the achievements of Scotland's dairy industry. And we have some of the best milk fields in the world, thanks to our ideal climate, good farming practices, investment in on-farm technology adoption, and continuous innovation across the board. This is a time of change for Scottish dairy, both in terms of the opportunities and the challenges. And to address these head on, the Scottish Government recently set up a farmer-led dairy climate group. It is focusing on reducing emissions and tackling climate change, which has long been a priority for the Scottish Government, and I'm delighted to see clear alignment between that work and this new strategy. The front page of the strategy document contains the tagline, "Looking back to look forwards." So I think it would be fitting at this point to reflect on the journey that has led us to this launch today. Back in 2013, an important wide-ranging study of the Scottish dairy industry was carried out entitled Scottish Dairy Review Ambition 2025. And one of the key recommendations of that report was that a Scottish Dairy Growth Board should be established. We set up the Dairy Growth Board in 2014 against the backdrop of growing global demand for dairy products. And Paul and his team have made great strides so far in unlocking many markets around the world, contributing to growth, and I would like to thank him and his colleagues for that. The Dairy Growth Board has been working hard over the past year, not only opening up new markets, but also strategizing and planning for the future. They and the Scottish Government recognise that dairy products can and should be perceived across the world in the same way our whisky and salmon products are, with such high esteem, such as the potential, and that has to be our aim in taking forward this new strategy. It is clear from the document we have in front of us today that the board's work, supported by SOAS and other expert input, is a detailed and ambitious plan for the future. It was important that a range of key players in the sector, such as dairy farmers, their representatives, and Scottish processors, contributed and shaped the strategy as it developed, and that happened. The strategy addresses exciting growth opportunities, such as in the international domain, but it rightly doesn't shy away from challenges like processing investment and climate change. In Scottish Dairy, we have already made progress with our environmental standards, and communicating these through engaging stories about our farmers and producers will help to build our stature and reputation in that regard. However, we know that in today's markets, buyers and consumers are increasingly influenced by the origin and environmental credentials of their food, so there is still more we can do to improve. Driving sustainable productivity and efficiency on farms will be critical, as will be ensuring minimal environmental impact and seeking a better return for farmers and all in the supply chain. These are all achievable aims and will not only deliver a competitive quality milk product, but also secure the future of our dairy supply chain. So there's been an important journey to this point, and there is an exciting period ahead. So I'll now hand back to Paul Grant to take forward the next part of today's proceedings. But I want to end by recognising, from speaking to Paul and others on the Dairy Growth Board today, that there is such great enthusiasm for the future of the industry. And I and the rest of the Scottish Government are absolutely behind you, and we look forward to helping you progress this strategy. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of today's event, and a very good afternoon to all of you watching around the world, and we look forward to continuing our work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ben. The Scottish Government have been a great sponsor of this activity, and it's great to hear of your ongoing commitment and support of the plan that we have put in place. I want to now talk about the development of the strategy and how we, over the last 18 months or so, have got to this conclusive position. The strategy has been led by the steering group. You can see the individuals all identified with their organisations there. Initially, we asked experts from all associated organisations with the dairy industry in Scotland to prepare a proposal on their vision for 2030, the weaknesses and the strengths, and to come and present that to the steering committee. That was then discussed at length, and from those inputs from the experts and the knowledge of the steering group and the experience they have gained over the last 5 years, we created a strategic document. It was really important to engage with the industry, and so we then went into an extended consultation process. And both Amanda and I went to each of the organisations highlighted there, the associated organisations, the processors, the farmers, and discussed with them the strategy that we prepared and their views and inputs. Throughout that process, there was a refinement to get to where we are. We had planned to launch the strategy in autumn 2020, but of course, the Brexit uncertainty and the COVID pandemic affected that. And so here we are today at a time when we think it is right to launch the 2030 strategy for dairy. We now have clarity about the trading environment for the future, and hopefully we have a return to some normality later this year thanks to the amazing vaccine program. And therefore we can seriously start talking about going about our business and delivering this opportunity. We did finally reconnect with the key people in the early part of this year, to make sure that the strategy was still relevant and the buy-in was still there. And so we have consulted at great length to be where we are today. We obviously need to look back at our experience in the journey so far before we look at where we're going to go in the next decade. So what have we learned? Well, we've clearly learned, as many of us know, but we now know the world knows, that Scotland's global position is absolutely perfect for dairy farming, the environment, the sustainability, the working practices, and that is globally acknowledged. And that's a great plus point. We have achieved things too, significant things. The first thing we did was to appoint a champion for international development, Roddy Wiles, who's done an amazing job in connecting us to world markets, to customers, and making sure that our processes are connected too. So we have a total alignment of the opportunity. And through that process, we've also learned an awful lot about what is of interest to our customers. And we discovered early on that cheese and cheddar cheese was the initial product of interest. Firstly, because there was great brand stories. It tasted excellent. And also, more importantly, it had extended shelf life. So the risk to the customers was much more limited. And this was the product that really got us into international markets. There were, of course, the negatives. It wasn't there. We didn't have a lot of choice. Scotland is not endowed with significant processing products and brands. And so clearly, cheddar was the lead situation. Over the last few years, we've entered 15 international markets. And as you can see there, last year we delivered £30 million of sales in those markets. The year before was 27. So we have in fact achieved growth even through the COVID era, even with all the frustrations of hospitality closures around the world, but we've still delivered growth. And that really is important. Not only growth, but we've also had continuity and sustainability. Our customers are buying for stock. They're supplying into the retail trade. And so this isn't just a one-off situation. This has continuity to it. We've worked with our artisan cheesemakers, 5 of them in particular, none of whom had really been exporting before. We mentored them into becoming competent exporters, and we helped them to build their business. One of those businesses was already doing $500,000 of exports business per annum, and it's transformed their business. Others have also seen significant growth, and 3 of the 5 are at the moment looking to expand their premises and expand their capacity based on the opportunity that they have been introduced to. Lactalis have been an outstanding partner in this process. We've built a very strong collaborative relationship between Roddy and Tom. And as a result of that, Lactalis developed a Scottish brand for us. We told them that their brand portfolio in the past didn't have a strong enough Scottish emphasis. They built a brand for us and them to sell. It's in the top corner of your chart. It's called Old Edinburgh. It's been one of the real successes of this project. And we are seeing containers every month of cheese going to Canada, to Costco and the general market of Old Edinburgh, a real continuity growth situation. And it's been developed by collaborating with a scale company with global presence. You can't achieve these successes unless you are directly connected to the customer from the processor. And we've learned over the period of the 5 years that the more distribution points you have, the higher the cost, the less competitive you are. So we have now achieved a direct from Scotland relationship to our customers, and we can now talk comfortably to any customer in the world, knowing that we can supply directly by sea or air and not disappoint them in terms of our supply chain. A really important breakthrough. The Dairy Hub was also a recommendation of the 2025 report. Stuart Martin has led this brilliantly. We started off obviously with very low inquiries, 200 in the first year, but now we're seeing 800 to 900 inquiries a year. Real inquiries, real interest, and real guidance required from the dairy farming community. And Stuart has done an outstanding job helping them on technical farming matters and business matters. And this is now a truly regarded organization in the dairy sector. We heard a lot in the early days about skills and shortage, and that still is an issue. But we worked hard with Skills Development Scotland. We worked hard with the education sector, with the colleges and with the farming community. And down in Dumfries and the Barony College, we set up a modern apprenticeship scheme 4 years ago for children leaving school and wanting to move into the dairy sector and agriculture. It has been very successful. We have created skilled people, and now we have people who've completed that apprenticeship and have gone into full-time work as a result of it. And recently we saw an award for this whole scheme to be developed into Ayrshire, and we're delighted that this experience is, if you like, achieving homegrown skills, which I believe is really important in the future world. But no, it's not all good news. We haven't achieved everything. We haven't achieved something that really is important, and that is ensuring that all the milk that we produce is processed and added value is created, and those products are sold in the to consumers. We have tried hard. We have seen some modest investment. We tried to secure a milk powder plant for Scotland, which we got very close to. But no, we haven't achieved that. We still see a lot of milk being sold for commodity, and we need to convert that into added value. It's a major, major part of the future programme that we're going to put to you today. And over the period of the last 5 years, we've seen increasing emphasis on the environment, climate change, of herd health. And yes, these are areas of real focus, important in the world of media and social media, getting the right message across and responding to the challenges that we face. So a lot more focus required in these two areas as well. I'm going to read you the vision because it's important that we understand our vision for 2030 and how we get there and what we believe 2030 is going to be like, and then how we connect to that. So Scotland is the perfect natural environment for dairy production, producing milk to meet the needs of the global market. It's 2030 and Scotland's dairy industry is thriving. Farm numbers have stabilised and herds are now more productive thanks to a focus over the past decade on sustainable productivity and on-farm efficiency. This has resulted in the sector improving its environmental impact, which was achieved with a lot of hard work using benchmark and support right throughout the supply chain. Farmers are investing more as they have seen a rise in the returns they get for their milk as global demand for Scottish dairy has increased. New and expanded processing facilities have been built, and we are now sending powdered milk to the Far East, as well as exporting liquid milk to international markets. We now have 4 international cheddar brands and 10 artisan cheesemakers exporting their goods internationally. Innovation and investment are at the heart of the industry. Consumers at home and abroad love Scottish dairy products. They are nutritious and quality assured and made with the respect of the history of our dairy expertise. So that is our vision. That is what we are seeking to achieve in 2030. And now it's important to see how we're going to make that happen. Well, this is our growth ambition, and you may be very surprised by these figures, and they need to be explained because they have been analysed and they are well-founded. To put it in perspective, the sales value of Scottish dairy products today is 800 million. So we are looking at a dramatic growth opportunity here. And so I need to spend a little time explaining these 4 opportunities to you. We start with cheese. I've already mentioned that we are in 15 markets globally, and I'll talk more about further development in that context. In the UK, we certainly see opportunity for growth. And in Scotland, we don't even have a Scottish Cheddar as the #1 brand. That has to be an ambition for this strategy. So over the 10 years, we are seeing a 200 million increase in sales. UHT and milk powder, these are processed products that do not happen in Scotland today, and yet they are dominant in the world and would be of interest if there was a Scottish branded offer. I'm pleased to be able to tell you today that we are making progress in this area. At this point in time, we are working on 2 UHT processing opportunities. The first is in milk. We have a site highlighted. We have an investor who has a guaranteed market in North Africa. And we are in the process now of securing this opportunity, and hopefully within the next 9 to 12 months, making it happen. The second UHT project is a different product. It's actually cream-based. It's for China. And this is a joint venture investment. On this particular case, we are looking now for a site in Scotland. That is the preferred location for the investors. We're working with Scottish Enterprise on this project. And we again hope within 12 months to have UHT cream being produced in Scotland and shipped to China. It's important to say that both these projects are presently being supplied from within Europe by third-party suppliers. And the owners and the investors wish to transfer their supply chain to Scotland to achieve long-term sustainable supply. And so we're not looking here at creating business, we're looking here at bringing existing business to Scotland and immediately making the difference. To give you some idea in terms of the milk project, the investment in equipment will satisfy an immediate requirement for 20 million litres per year, but the investment that is going to be put into the plant will actually deliver 100 million litres per year of UHT milk. And therefore, we have the opportunity to go and sell that product outside North Africa to other markets, and that is one of the agreements that we have in place with the investor. The next area is fresh milk exports, and you may be surprised to see this, but this is a very exciting and interesting development that occurred 15 months ago. 15 months ago, Muller gave notice to the Northeast farmers, 12 months notice in terms of termination of supply. We were contacted by a Dutch company who had developed the technical ability to take fresh milk and ship it to markets within 40 days shipping time of the port of the port where the milk was going to be delivered to. We set up a feasibility project. We invited them over to Scotland to look at our dairy industry and to understand the technologies that occurred. We persuaded the government that we needed some feasibility funds to make this happen. And we achieved that. And so this company has been for the last 15 years bringing fresh orange juice from Brazil into Europe and other world markets, and had developed the technology to maintain stability of product during the shipping period. And 4 or 5 years ago, they decided that the next liquid product they wished to make happen was milk. And they went and did all the scientific testing that they could in laboratories and what have you to prove the technology in milk. And then they got a significant grant from the EU to test that technology in reality by shipping milk from Holland to Saudi Arabia. And they proved that after 40 days of shipping, the product remained as stable as it was when it left Holland. And they then went and made dairy products with that milk and compared it to local Saudi milk, and there was no discernible difference. So we've been working on this project now for the last 12 months in the knowledge that this really was of interest, that Scotland had excess milk, and the world, and particularly the world in developing markets, is very interested in more dairy products and having that supplied to them. Before this technology was developed, it wasn't possible to ship fresh milk around the world, but Milkways, the Dutch company, have patented this technology, and now we have partnered with them to make this happen, and Scotland to be the supply source of that milk. We had hoped to go to Norway, but Norway had prohibitive tariffs, 167% on dairy products to protect their farmers, so that wasn't possible. But over the last 6 months, we've been working on evaluating markets, doing studies, and getting the priorities right. And of course, we have to wait for the outcome of the Brexit circumstances, because that could have been a very big challenge. But now we know we have open trading. We have earmarked the Mediterranean countries as the priority opportunity. This is where water is increasingly scarce. This is where dairy products are of interest. And next week, having had a very good introductory session with the British Embassy, we start formal joint talks on the possibility of shipping fresh milk to Morocco. Morocco is the gateway to Africa. It has free port status in terms of its terminals. And at this point in time, it looks like it could be a very attractive option. It's very early days, there's no guarantees, but we're going to work really hard to make this happen. This figure here of 150 million is based on 3 markets in the next 10 years, because the minimum quantity required to make this work on an annual basis from a supply chain point of view is 150 million litres per market. And so that is why we look here at 150 million, 3 markets in the next 10 years, crudely at 30p per litre. The final piece is the 100 million for new and existing products. So this is about butter, this is about ice cream, this is about product extension, this is about drinks, this is about extending into retail and also into food service. And I don't think in the next 10 years that that's an unreasonable annual figure of growth that we can look at in this context. So as you can see, it's a very significant figure, but there is some real calculations and opportunities behind it. So to make this happen, what do we need to do in terms of the various critical criteria? And so we've looked at key recommendations in 5 different sections. We start with markets. Well, we need to continue to sell the dairy story across the world. There's no point in just starting and then dropping something. That would be a disaster. So we need to continue the ambassadorial work of Roddy around the world. And we need to make sure that our growth champion there is funded to make this happen. He is targeted to double our markets. So from 15 to 30, hopefully nearer 40. And obviously not just to enter markets, to grow share within those markets. I've already indicated we now have direct from Scotland to global markets, a critical part of this process. And clearly we need to mentor artisan processors to grow their businesses, but also to find new entrants. We're looking, as I said before, for 10 rather than the present 5 within this timescale. And we will mentor them, lead them, and connect them with markets and opportunities. I've also mentioned that we have a strong relationship with Lactalis. Lactalis, on the back of their old Edinburgh experience, 12 months ago, decided to launch a cheddar out of Scotland. under their own global president brand. This is an amazing breakthrough with a company of this scale. So they have launched British Cheddar. Yes, it is British. It's in a tartan pack. It's made in Stranraer with 100% Scottish milk. So that is the key feature. In 2020, they launched this product into 20 markets in the world, minor markets, but still great experience. And this year, I'm told by Tom and Mike Chatters that they plan to extend this now into another 20 markets. So by the end of this year, British Cheddar, made in Stranraer from Scottish milk, should be on sale in 40 markets around the world. This is going to be a major contributor to our growth plans. And then clearly, we need to manage the market in terms of these activities. We will find different distributors, different customers, different brands in different places in the same market. This all needs to be managed. And that is why we need to have our global champion, Roddy Wild, leading this particular project. In the UK and Scotland, yes, of course, we need to also grow and respond to the opportunities. So we didn't initially in this project make any contribution into the UK market because that was not part of our remit. We agreed with all the processing companies that the UK was their remit and the artisan companies. But increasingly, there has been pressure from the artisan processors to do a similar job in the UK that we've done internationally. And so we are seeking to appoint a sales champion for the UK who will work with the artisan processors to introduce their products into specialty retail and food service. We also wish to attend the Nantwich Cheese Show. It is the key show of the year in the UK. Scotland has never had a presence at Nantwich, and we definitely want to be there in 2022. And to have a sales champion to follow up on all those leads is a really, really important part of the process. We believe there's an opportunity in developing a cheese board for the hospitality industry. Many restaurants and catering outlets already do it, but there's a greater opportunity to make growth through that. And we've had some very interesting international challenges and UK inquiries about what we describe as product pairing. So cheese to be offered as part of a whiskey experience, cheese to be offered as part of a beer experience. We have a huge hospitality industry in this country. There is a great interest in hospitality when it all opens up, and clearly cheese can be part of that product pairing. This needs work done on it. This will be done through the sales champion activity, but we do believe in the next 10 years we can make a real impact on this pairing opportunity. And finally, we need to mentor the artisan processors to develop new products and new opportunities, but to do that with a market and customer connection so that they aren't just doing things they'd like to do. They're doing things that can be done, that achieves growth and has a connection both to customers and consumers. We now look at processing in terms of our recommendations. And as you have already heard, we need now to move to a different way of attracting investment into Scotland. Up until now, we have been very reactive to opportunities, and we've helped to make them happen, and we've championed them through the various organisations. But we know we need process investment in Scotland in some of the product areas that the world wants, but we don't have. And we know the Scottish brand travels, and therefore we need to go out and target this investment. We've done a good job in UHT. There may be further opportunities, but it's in milk powder that the real opportunity comes. And yes, of course, the world is mature in this area, but there's no Scottish brand. And we know that we can sell that if we can get this investment. So we're going to be very proactive. We're going to seek a dedicated resource to work with us on this opportunity. We're going to prepare the investment opportunity package and go out and try and persuade an investor to come to Scotland and make this important investment for us for global supply. Country of origin is really important. It's important to promote Scotland, but it's also important to protect Scottish products. The identity of where it comes from is really, really so important. So we'd love to get this one signed off and agreed. The aligning of milk to product is really important in terms of productivity and competitiveness. It's also important in terms of annual supply. And so I know the process industry are working with their farmers on this opportunity, and I'm sure that that will improve over the years to both improve reliability but competitiveness, and ensuring that the product is using the right and the best ingredient. Finally, it is really important that the government re-establish the type of grant schemes that we have all enjoyed in the years gone by, the process and marketing grant, farming grants, and what have you. We know that this situation has been frustrated by the Brexit conclusion, but I'm assured by those involved in the government that in the next few weeks, these schemes will be relaunched. There may be some modifications to them, but they will still be very attractive in terms of helping to incentivize people to invest, both people within Scotland, but those who wish to come to Scotland. This is a really important part of our growth programme. In farming, we have already, as you've heard, established the Scottish Dairy Hub. It has been hugely successful. It is now a partner in the process of helping farming to be more productive, more competitive, more fit for purpose. And so that needs to be funded on an ongoing basis. Now, the next bit is important. We are looking for an annual fund of £1 million. Half of that we are going to allocate to carbon reduction activity and specifically to assessment on farm of carbon levels. The other half is important to help to improve performance monitoring, to improve farm activities and practices, and also capital investment in on-farm processing. So we are looking to achieve that. We've had conversations with people, and we're very confident that we will, through the climate change challenge, find these funds to give that activity the priority it now needs. I've talked about skills already. We need to continue the programme of modern apprenticeships and developing our own skills. We can't use, if you like, people from overseas as easily anymore. So we really must get behind our youth and those who have the interest and help them to become very capable farm employees. And then in innovation, there are a number of projects at the moment where innovation is at the heart, whether it's in manufacturing or in products. We need to make sure that these are collaborative. We need to make sure these aren't duplicating, and we need to make sure that they are aligned to the strategy. So a very important part of the future in terms of the way forward. Environment is increasingly an area of focus, and climate change. I think that once the COVID pandemic has been addressed, this subject will become increasingly critical, and the pressures to do something about it and reduce carbon activity is going to be very, very significant. And it's going to be linked to all sorts of things, whether it's financing, whether it's grants, whether it's improvement packages. Addressing and being seen to work at reducing carbon is going to be fundamental. On our board, we have Professor Dave Roberts from the Barony SRUC, and we have Paul Flanagan from AHDB. I was delighted a few months ago when the two of them decided to get together and started to discuss bringing together their various resources and making sure that we create a very special world-leading carbon reduction facility based on the farms, the strategic farms that they have control over. it's, if you like, a positive knowledge transfer facility where various farm practices will be tested and tried, and the knowledge from that will be transferred back to farmers. And they themselves can then look at doing things in a much more confident way and making sure it happens. So this is a major breakthrough with these two organisations wanting to work together to set up in Scotland this world-leading carbon reduction facility. It has now been joined by SAC, who are also involved in this process. And so again, the whole initiative of collaborating together to achieve this facility is building momentum. And I'm very confident that by the end of this year, we'll have a clear plan and we'll be able to implement a facility which farmers really find of value and has a sustained future in terms of making this happen. Processors obviously have to address carbon as well, and many of them have carbon reduction plans already. So, you know, this is in areas of distribution, this is in terms of energy management, this is in terms of packaging, this is in terms of waste. It's a really important part of the process that not only do process challenge farmers to do the best they can in terms of carbon reduction, but they themselves come on board and deliver within their own processing facilities. Now, we talked a lot about whether we should target and put some real goals down in terms of carbon reduction activities. And so we think it's important that there are goals that will achieve the carbon reduction and meet the government's standards that they have now put in place. So our recommendations is that by 2023, 50% of all dairy farms are involved and have done a carbon audit on their farm. By 26, 75%, and by 2030, 100% of all Scottish farms are involved in carbon assessment programs, improvement programs associated to that, and then meeting the reduction programs that are in place and regulated as a result. These assessments need to be done, in our view, annually. They need to be match funded by the government. It's important that the government are supporting farmers to help to pay for this annual cost. Yes, there are going to be benefits, but it's really important that that commitment is joined up. And it's important that that assessment is done independently, because at the end of the day, I suspect policy will result from these assessments. But it isn't just about doing an assessment, it's actually doing something about it. And so therefore, we hope and expect that there will be an annual mentoring session, or there will be an annual mentoring support and an action plan that follows from these assessments, so that we work together on achieving these goals. And now, more recently, really importantly, in the dairy sector, a climate change group has been set up, which is farmer-led. I'm actually part of that process, and they are going to report on a much more detailed way as to how carbon reduction can be achieved and net carbon reduction can be achieved in 20 to 30 years' time. You will see in the next few weeks some serious recommendations in a number of areas, if you like, putting meat on the bone of our overarching recommendations. So it's important then to gain a commitment to make all this happen. And this is where the supply chain and the funding comes into play. So we're asking for £250,000 per year to fund these activities. This is the international champion, Roddy Wild. This is the hub. This is the UK champion, the new role that we're recommending. It's all the expenses associated with that. And we are very confident that this money will be committed. We know that a high proportion is already committed through the budget process, and the additional costs we have recently made an application for, and it has been well received. So we're very confident that this is going to be achieved, and we're going to be able to enact our recommendations. I've already talked about the grant schemes. Absolutely vital that these schemes come in as soon as possible so that we can talk to potential investors both here and overseas about the attractiveness and the benefits of Scotland as a place to invest in dairy. We have come across duplication in terms of resourcing, in terms of activities, and it's important that we look at that and we release cost and resources as a result of that. And then when we do, we will have more funds to invest back into farm improvement programs. It's an important part of this challenge. And finally, the Scottish Dairy Growth Board will, in our view, continue to mentor, collaborate and monitor the delivery of this plan to 2030. It's really, really important that people have challenges, have priorities, and are held to account for the actions that we are recommending. So finally, I make no apology for the focus on our global opportunities for growth, because that is where it is for Scottish brands and products. We have, in my opinion, built the foundations. Now we must build, if you like, the shed or the house by 2030. To achieve this, we must continue to sell the story about Scotland and all its benefits as a sustainable dairy supply country. And we have to move from being a reactive resource to being much more proactive with the resources to make it happen and to go out there and make this significant opportunity happen. So thank you very much indeed for your time and your interest and hopefully your support. I just want to make a very big thank you to Amanda Brown, who many of you have met throughout this journey. She has supported the Dairy Growth Board in all its activities. She supported me in all the consultation processes. She's developed the strategy and worked on getting that to final print. And it's been an outstanding job. And she is the secret behind this activity today. We didn't bring professionals in, we tried to do it ourselves. And there's been a few wobbles, but we've done bloody well in my view. So a huge thank you to Amanda for all you've done. And thank you very much. I'm now going to hand you back to Alan, who's going to lead us through the question and answer panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. That's a very in-depth and great description of all that's to come in the strategy. So let me introduce you to today's panel members. Obviously, Paul will be part of that. We have Roddy Wild, who is the Scottish Dairy Growth Board Market Development Director. He'll obviously take questions on the market. Paul Flanagan from HDB. He's the Strategy Director for Dairy and Scotland Director, and he'll also look at the farming questions. We've got Professor Dave Roberts from SRUC, Professor of Dairy Farming Systems and Head of Agriculture and Business Management Department there. And Dave will look at climate, environment, and sustainability. And we have Stuart Martin, NFUS, and also Dairy Hub and Policy Manager, who I'm sure many of you know. So Stuart will focus on items specific to the Dairy Hub and farming as well. So we've had a few questions in, and it looks as if the hot topic of milk to the rest of the world is of quite interest. So Paul, the first question I've got here from Nick Parsons. And is there an interest in the farm assurance standard that is leading the opportunity into Morocco of the export of fresh milk via Red Tractor? Paul, if you want to unmute, that would be good. Paul? You can't hear. Paul? Okay. I think we had a little bit of connection problem there. Roddy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent, excellent. Maybe you can take that question then on quality assurance standards involved in exporting fresh milk into Morocco, and perhaps what Red Tractor are looking at.
Specifically Red Tractor, I'm probably unable to answer, but the question, the fundament of that question as regards a quality assurance standard for the milk being transported and delivered, yes, very much so. That's at the heart of the project. The absolute details of it, I will need to defer to Paul and the project partner. But having a quality assurance standard certified and audited, yes, that's part of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, are you there yet? We seem to be having a problem with Paul's connections. Okay, I'll move on. Just a question for Dave. And it's a good question regarding if we are wanting to grow our milk output, but how do we square the argument for carbon reduction grants and while exporting milk to other parts of the world? And I dare say that may also mean increasing UK production. We continue to make the argument for not offshoring emissions to other parts of the world. Have you got some thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah, I think we need to make sure that however we export it, or the companies that are exporting it, export it as efficiently as possible, and therefore minimize the carbon footprint. So shipping, for example, is relatively good compared to air flight. So it is that sort of element of the companies trying to minimize the carbon impact of it. There will be some, but it needs to be minimized.
Yeah, okay, that's good. And is Paul back on? No, still. Paul, can you unmute? We really haven't got a technical...
You mean Flanagan or me?
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. Yes, you're quite right, Mr. Grant. I should say. Yes, would you like to add to what Dave says about any concerns about the argument for not offshoring emissions by exporting to the rest of the world?
Well, I think it's, we have looked at this, and Deirdre has looked at it as well, and there's no question about it that significant quantities, because we are talking here about significant quantities in sea freight transfer, is actually less carbon levels than maybe processing in home market and shipping it thereafter, particularly milk powder. So there are some serious environmental advantages here through this new technology of sea shipping of scale.
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks for that. A question for Stuart. The dairy hub's been mentioned, Stuart. It's been a great part of the existing strategy. So going forward, how do you see the evolving role of the Scottish Dairy Hub in the new strategy?
I think, well, the hub is at farm gate level, Alan, but I think what the hub can do is be the sort of step into the world of the growth board. And that happens on a pragmatic basis. Now we're feeding into the growth board, hearing the sort of mood from farmers, hearing the challenges that farmers are doing. But also I think what's been very good in the whole project is the hub is a contact for farmers and other external stakeholders. So a couple of the projects that Paul referred to earlier actually came in via the hub, and then it was the sort of expertise of Roddy and Paul picking them up to take them to the next stage. So the hub, is, as I say, farm gate level, but sort of maybe sits a bit into the centre of the circle of the whole project. And I think it's possibly reassuring for farmers as well to know that there's somebody in there championing the cause of the farmers, and that doesn't get lost, because, and it is very clearly stated in the report, if this doesn't add value to farmers and help them, then the project will fall short.
Okay, no, great.
Just a quick one on this. It's a really important point that Stuart makes. We have the most significant inquiries coming in on an investment basis or a brand development basis have actually come through the hub. And people find it the easiest to route in terms of interest to dairy activities. And it really has been a really important focal entry point for outside interests.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And to the other Paul Flanagan, and it ties in with one of the questions here from Helen about knowledge transfer and the like. So Paul, there's obviously lots of information out there for dairy farmers, but connecting the right people with the right information at the right time is a tricky part. So how do you plan to provide the right events and opportunities for farmers to keep learning and developing their businesses?
Thanks, Alan. That's a good question. Let me answer that two ways. So I guess firstly from my own organisation, HDB, and I want to give credit to Dorian Anderson and Sophie Brewster just to supercharging what we do in Scotland. We've got 2 people on the ground in Scotland. We've got over 800 farmers, and they're getting around there and dealing with the challenges of COVID. They've really risen to that challenge. So we're now getting about 1,000 people actually watching webinars either live and on playback on this, and actually linked into the climate change stuff. We have a carbon week this week. I know we've had a number of Scottish farmers into that. But I think the key word that Paul talked about earlier is collaboration. So, and that's collaboration either with, the Climate Change Committee that Jackie McCreary and Sarah Simpson have currently got, or with NFUS, or with the Dairy Hub, or with Dave at SRUC, or indeed with SAC or the Scottish Government. It's about, reducing duplication. We don't want to be doing similar meetings from different organisations in the same place. It's about using the brain power of not only the people within the Dairy Hub, but in the different organisations, but ultimately with farmers. And from being involved with the climate change group, I think that's been a great way of really breaking it out, getting a group of 10 to 15 people involved in that, and you're getting some lots of challenge and different ideas from that. And I think ultimately, while we will set the framework from the Scottish Dairy Growth Board, it's about listening to farmers and listening to those in the industry, and taking this plan forward and making it better, and learning from overseas what they do in other parts of the UK or indeed globally, to ensure we take the best bits of that, we add that on to what we do in Scotland, and just improve us all. Because as we know, and I think as Paul talked about at the beginning, there are some particular benefits of the Scottish dairy industry. We have some challenges, I suppose, geographically in terms of serving the marketplace. But I think if we add it all up together, if we can work together, we can make sure the engagement channels working back and forward to farmers and to the rest of the industry are working well. And I think this document puts them down, in an excellent way. I think we've got a really cracking chance.
Great. Good points, Paul. And I'm going to just extend that a little bit back to Dave, and just talking about the carbon issues. And Dave, could you give us some examples of the win-win actions which would help reduce carbon emissions and improve profitability on farm?
Yeah, I think that we tend to focus too often on just one individual sort of part of the whole farm. It's the whole farm system that matters, and there are some really easy win-wins. People calving animals too late, so age at first calving is a really important one. I don't think animal health has had enough emphasis, so reducing the number of unplanned culls, reducing the amount of mortality has an effect on the carbon, but also obviously an effect on the profitability of a farm. The number of animals that have one lactation and then a culled at the end of the first lactation is much too high on our farms, so reducing that. And the obvious one of better use of manure. We're still sort of got a long way to sort of make better use of manure. So all those examples are ones that would improve the carbon footprint, but also would improve the profitability of dairy farms. Yeah,
okay, that's great. Thanks, Dave. And I'll just extend this question a little further back to Paul Grant. There's a question here that's relevant. How do you see the Scottish Dairy Growth Board's vision fitting with the Climate Change Committee's pathway, which does include a 20% reduction in dairy consumption in 2030? So I think it's that challenge between growth and restraint. How do we manage that, Paul?
Well, I think it's important that the growth opportunity, we bring the growth opportunities forward, and the farming population responds to it. I'm well aware of the fact that one of the easier ways to reduce carbon is to reduce animals on farm, but we need to work again in a coordinated way. So many of the projects I've talked about have a lead time of 12 to 18 months. And therefore, it is about working together and bringing those opportunities to the farming community, but in a timescale where they can respond and achieve the growth, which actually supports the whole carbon reduction program to some degree.
Sure, and thank you. Paul Flanagan, you want to come in?
Yeah, I think it was Sarah Simpson that raised that, as I said on the chat. I think we need to have an honest conversation about this in terms of the costs that are involved in improving farmers improving their environmental footprint and where they sit in the supply chain. I think some of the things we can do, and Dave identified a number of them, will drive productivity improvements on farm. But some of the interventions will take money, and we have to be honest about, if farmers are going to invest money on that to improve environmental benefits, who's that for? Is it for the processor, for the retailer? Is it for the farmer? And have an honest conversation there about how we're going to achieve this. I suppose that the governments will have targets there as well. So I don't think we've quite landed on how we're going to square this circle. But I suppose coming back to the main point that Paul made at the start, Scotland has natural advantages here. If we all get aligned and work towards those natural advantages, are clear about the added value markets we actually want to chase, and the benefits that farmers will get from being part of those supply chains, then I think we can achieve that. Yeah. But there's quite a number of conversations I think we need to get through before we achieve that.
Yeah, and I think, as we know, there's a huge willingness of the sector to pull together and work together. And there's just a couple of more questions. I realise we're a little bit over time. It's one for Roddy, and it's: do you think there are any other changes necessary for the supply chain to ensure that the benefits of export growth are realised at farm level, but just picked also at processing as well?
I think that's all about successfully driving the growth and through market development. Be that domestic market or overseas, and I think the real key element in that is our ability to consolidate both in the supply chain itself and across different sectors. When we're talking about added value dairy products consolidated with other Scottish food products in demand. And that logistic consolidation and supply chain streamlining, something that we're actively working on, is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I think you're right, Roddy. And what Paul mentioned in his presentation about getting the right products, the right markets, and some of the new things we're seeing coming through for Scotland, such as UHT and fresh milk exports. These are other opportunities, and being market responsive, which is key. A final question, and if we haven't answered them all, we will get back to everybody. It's one for Paul Grant, which I think you may have covered in the presentation, but a point from David Keeley: the current Scottish milk processing facilities are aging significantly. What does the DGB intend to do to support a renewal of these current operations?
Well, at the end of the day, we can only do certain things. I mean, the actual processing facilities is not our responsibility. But at the end of the day, we can only put growth opportunities forward. Then those processors or artisan companies can decide whether they can afford to invest into their plants, or whether or not it's significant enough to replace those plants with more productive and more efficient plants. And that's, of course, where the grant schemes come in to help these things happen. So again, we're working together based on circumstances, but clearly we would love to have very productive, efficient plants to work with.
Absolutely, and I think we have seen some significant investment over recent year or two in the dairy sector by the businesses. So I'm sure by pulling together the public and the private resources, that's the way forward. Okay, well that's the end of the question time. Thank you everybody for listening. I'm just going to hand back to Paul now, just to say some closing remarks, some thank yous. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Alan, very much. And thank you to the panel for dealing with those questions very speedily. I was a little bit over time, so apologies for that. I do hope that you judge that the opportunity for dairy is significant. The opportunity for dairy is significant on a global platform. We've judged that it is there for the doing. It will need the collaboration and the working together of all the various stakeholders, but the timing is right. The timing is perfect to get behind this now and to deliver for Scotland a real dairy opportunity. It's something the world has been missing. It's something we were told many times, where has your dairy products been? We've been waiting for that to happen. So now, yes, it's about pulling it all together and making sure we deliver on this with the support of all parties involved. Thank you all for your time. I hope you found it of great value, and I look forward to working with you and the Growth Board in achieving these plans in the future. All the very best, and thank you.